Right, so today I wanted to talk a little bit about this article from the CBC titled Who Wants to Abolish Billionaires? A Look at the Federal NDP's Convention Resolutions. So let's look at the resolutions and then we'll talk a little bit about it. And again, I am warning you, it is worse than you thought. Anyway, so the first one's abolish billionaires by taxing all gross wealth above 1 billion at 100%. And I'll get into why that would never work. Create a wealth tax for personal incomes of the rich. Campaign for severe penalties against tax evasion, including the confiscation of untaxed profits, um, asset seizures, and jail time. Um, Health. Work with provincial and territorial governments to implement high quality long term care and ensure all facilities are built on a non-profit model. Pass legislation requiring the maintenance of an adequate stockpile of personal protective equipment at all times, blah, blah, blah. Create a crown corporation to produce vaccines, pharmaceuticals, and medical devices. Negotiate a new Canadian health accord with provinces and territories to ensure vision, dental, hearing, mental health, podiatry, physiotherapy, chiropractic, and seniors care are covered. Decriminalize all illegal drugs. Um, so again, finally something that I would agree with. Update the NDP policy book to state that all Canadians are entitled to access abortion, blah, blah, blah. Um, Labor and workers create a guaranteed basic income, implement a $15 or $20 an hour federal minimum wage. So again, for all the people that have said, oh, we can't raise the minimum wage to 15 because then they're just going to want to raise it to 20, well, they're basically admitting that that's the case. Legislate at least seven employer-paid sick days for all federally regulated workers and 14 additional days during public health outbreaks. Legalize the right to strike for all working people. Again, that none of this doesn't make any sense. Like, I'll just briefly go into why this makes absolutely no sense. So, again, if you work in the public sector, there is no profit motive. So why in the world would you need to strike? Right? The whole point of unions and having the right to strike was entirely based upon the evil capitalist is exploiting us and not paying us enough for making us work in horrible conditions. Well, again, the government has no profit motive, so why in the world would you need that reason, right? But the reality is that they just want to get paid more and more and more and more and more, regardless of how good of a job they're actually doing, right? Make it an offense for employers to use replacement workers during that strike, nationalize major auto companies and shift toward environmentally sustainable cars, reduce the work week to 32 hours without loss of pay or benefits, and outlaw mandatory overtime. Again, like, what if it's a business? Like, I don't understand. If you voluntarily sign on to say, like, okay, well, there's sometimes you may need to work overtime and you agree to it, what's wrong with that? I really don't get it, right? Like, if you voluntarily do it, what's the problem with that? Achieve emissions reduction of 55% by 2030 compared to 1990 levels. Develop a net zero building code for all new buildings by 2025. Actively campaign against all new pipelines. Support the removal of subsidies for fossil fuel industries and support incentives to develop Canadian renewable energy. Support the legislation that imposes a tariff on foreign goods and services from countries that do not have comparable carbon pricing system. Establish a free public transport within 1 year of forming government. Um, Social issues. One resolution calls for the review of the RCMP's $10 billion budget and significant investments in mental health, de-escalation and harm reduction in cases involving substance abuse. Others call for complete or partial defunding, disarming, and disbanding of police forces in Canada. One resolution calls for the phasing out of the Canadian military. Another resolution calls for the NDP government to ban the use of pepper spray by law enforcement. So again, this is the other thing people need to understand too, is that when they say, "Oh, the cops killed the guy in cold blood," you don't understand. If they disarm cops, they're going to go for the tasers and the pepper spray next. They've already went for the chokeholds, even though anyone who understands how chokeholds work, if you're trained properly in using them, it's pretty well impossible to kill someone. Right? So like the people that take these people seriously, like you have some of the dumbest and or naive people that exist these days. Because again, I mean the same thing goes, like I said, for the minimum wage. Right? People say, oh, if we only had 15, that would solve poverty, and then they'll implement 15. It won't solve poverty because basic economics shows that. Then they're just going to call for 20. Right? And I'll get into the whole wealth tax thing. It's the exact same playbook. Um, Force web giants to pay taxes in Canada, place the telecommunications industry under public ownership, create a publicly owned telecom, propose a national strategy for broadband internet services. Okay, so this is where things get really even more crazy, just when you think they can't get any crazier. A moratorium on evictions, mortgage foreclosures, and utility cutoffs due to unemployment. A national housing strategy to ensure Canadians have access to safe, adequate, and accessible home, the construction of affordable housing on vacant federal lands. So again, this is basically just the usual rent control garbage that when you don't allow the market to operate properly, you guarantee that housing will become more affordable, right? Again and again, how's the whole public housing thing? How's that working out in the States? They have massive amounts of public housing. How does that work out? Right? It doesn't, right? They're just breeding grounds of crime and just degeneracy in general, right? Part of the reason why, I mean, anyone who's in real estate knows this, is that part of the reason why housing is continuing to go up lately is because there's a moratorium on evictions in a lot of places. And again, people say, "Oh, you don't know what you're." Yes, yeah, it's just basic economics. I don't care about your BS. You don't know what you're talking about. There is a fixed supply. Well, I mean, it is growing, right? But there's a supply of housing, right? There's the supply of housing. There's the demand for people that want to buy said housing. When you place a moratorium on evictions, the supply of new houses available to be bought or rent goes down, thus driving up the price of the ones that actually are available. Again, this is stuff 5-year-olds could figure out and understand. Right? So again, part of the reason why things are getting more and more and more expensive is because we have stupid stuff like this to where we have a moratorium on evictions. Right? And if you really want to, again, people say, oh no, we got to help people who are in need. Okay, we'll do it voluntarily. Create a government fund to where people can, you know, apply to, get a mortgage payment or two covered, if they lose their job or something like that. Okay, but just make it voluntary. Make it so the government isn't controlling it, because if the government's controlling it, they're going to screw it up and they're going to make things worse. Right? The most heavily controlled housing markets in Canada is Toronto and Vancouver. Those are the ones where the governments right on from the local level up to the federal level. Those are the ones that are the ones that the governments mess with the most. And which ones are the most unaffordable? Oh, wouldn't you know? It's Toronto and Vancouver, right? So again, like, I don't get how people can be so stupid. Like, it's such a simple fix. I mean, housing prices are never going to be quote unquote affordable because the government has messed with things for so long, but they could be a lot better than they are now. Um, So student debt, cancel student debt for all current and former post-secondary students, support a universal transit pass for students, incorporate student housing in the national housing policy. So again, they're basically going to print up tens of billions of dollars, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars to pay for this. Right? Like, if these people got elected, it would be a disaster. Now again, would they go through with a lot of this stuff? Maybe not, but they would go through with some of it. So now I guess we can get to the main point here, is the whole, um, ending the concept of billionaires or abolish billionaires. Um, it would work, but it wouldn't work in the way they think it would work, and it may not even work, to be quite honest. Now, um, So let's just say, well, I mean, let's just be honest about this kind of stuff. If a if taxing all gross wealth above $1 billion at 100%, if that was implemented tomorrow, do you genuinely think that you would get every dollar of every billionaire who had of their net worth above $1 billion? Do you genuinely think that it would not happen? It wouldn't happen, right? So here's the reality behind this too, is that and this is just proof that again, people who believe this stuff are just so economically illiterate, it's not even funny. And then again, you always hear like, oh, well, if we just took a small percentage of Jeff Bezos's money and gave it to his workers, they could get this massive rate. Again, that's not how reality works. Again, people who say that are just coming from a place of being insanely economically illiterate. Again, take Jeff Bezos for example. The vast majority of Jeff Bezos's money is not sitting in a bank account. Right, I remember, it was a while back, like a year or two ago, at work, and I was, overheard this conversation of two people. One of them was like the owner of the place too, which just kind of bothered me that some lowly guy like me understood this stuff, and the guy who owns the damn place didn't. He was the one arguing, or I mean, they weren't arguing; it was a friendly conversation. But there was some guy who I don't know if he supported the NDP or not, but at the very least, he supported this wealth tax thing. And I don't remember hardly any of what they were talking about, but the one thing I do remember very distinctly is the wealth tax guy saying, I don't, or something along the lines of, I have no idea why anyone needs $1 billion in a bank account or $10 billion in a bank account. And I mean, there were two things that are insane about that. Number one, the guy that we was talking to didn't understand the reality behind it. And number two, nobody has $1 billion in a bank account, right? Leaving your money in a bank account, again, like it just, like I say, it comes from a place of being completely economically illiterate for many reasons. Um, Number one being, if you're Jeff Bezos and you want to buy a $10 million house, you want to buy a yacht, you don't need the cash up front. In fact, you would be stupid to pay in cash in a lot of ways. And a lot of people would say, oh, well, why? Well, because the vast majority of Jeff Bezos' wealth, same goes for Elon Musk, same goes for the majority of billionaires, is tied up in usually the stock of their company. Right? So if you're Jeff Bezos and you want to buy something, you don't just have cash sitting around. That would be stupid because, again, the Amazon stock over the long run is going to go up. If you leave your money in cash, it is going to go down. So, in other words, if you have $1 million in a bank account, anyone that actually understands just basic economics knows that the official government inflation rate's about 2%. Now the reality is that it's higher than that, but let's just take the official government number. Okay, well, if you have $1 million in a bank account, that means that, oh, I mean, let's just say a billion, right? You got a billion. Okay, well, that means that $20 million is just basically a year is being taken from you. $20 million is being taken from you, and it just basically disappeared. It would literally be the equivalent to just burning 2 or 3% of your wealth. So why in the world would you leave your money in a bank account? You wouldn't, right? You wouldn't. You would have it in investments of some sort. Okay, so now that we have that out of the way, that again, billionaires, they don't have billions of dollars sitting in a bank account, and they're not earning billions of dollars a year either. This is the other thing about this stuff that makes absolutely no sense, is that if you look at someone like Elon Musk lately, it has been normal for his net worth to go up or down billions of dollars in a day, like in a day. Why is that? Is because the vast majority of his wealth is tied up in Tesla stock. Tesla, it's a fairly volatile stock, meaning, so this is the thing too, that if Elon Musk, if his Tesla stock goes up $1 billion in a day, does that mean or 2 billion, does that mean we're gonna tax $1 billion of that? Well, what if it goes down 2 billion the next day? Does that mean he gets to write off two or one? No, they would probably say no, but that's the problem, is that these people have no idea what they're talking about. Like no idea at all what they're talking about. Um, and this is the other really big problem with this stuff too, is that people say, oh, no one, even if you want to take the whole nobody needs $1 billion argument, which again is completely false. Again, they don't have $1 billion in cash, right? That's not how it works, right? And again, this is like people, and this is another way people are economically illiterate too, is that say you're Jeff Bezos and you want to buy a $10 million house, how would you buy it? The average person would say, oh, I'd take my cash and I'd go buy it. But that's not how he would do it, right? Maybe that's how, but the most likely way would simply be him put up $10 million of Amazon stock as collateral and he'd pay it back over time. And considering the fact that his, Amazon stock is pretty high levels of collateral, and knowing that the chances of him not being able to pay it are pretty much zero, they would give him a rate that's pretty much zero, right? And he would pay it off. He'd get the Amazon stock back at the end, which would continue to go up. So again, this is just the thing that the average person is just so illiterate. It's not even funny. And it's just proof that most of these billionaires, they know what they're doing, right? They know what they're doing. And we know that the average person, again, like the lottery is a prime example of this, right? If you look, I think it's like 80% of people who win the lottery end up declaring bankruptcy within like the next 10 years, or it may even be sooner. And that's just it comes from the fact that the average person is economically illiterate, right? Because if you won the lottery and you were smart, you would invest the vast majority of that, and if you wanted to buy anything, you would simply take the investments as collateral on anything you would want to buy. Now, I mean, if you were really smart, you wouldn't buy a bunch of crap, but if you really wanted to, you wouldn't go pay cash, right? Because you could invest the money, go buy the stuff using the investments as collateral, pay it off over time, and you would buy something knowing that the chances of you not being able to pay it off over time is very low. And when it's all said and done, you would get your investments back with compound interest, or most of it at least, and you get the thing you wanted. But again, the average person's too like they're so dumbed down that they don't understand that. And this is the other big problem with that too, is that they would say, "Oh, it's only billionaires, right? It's only billionaires." Well, this is the problem. Their own numbers and the own data show that I think even if they implemented this would be like $5 to $10 billion a year. They would probably get a bunch up front, but over the long run, it would be a very, very, very small amount. Because one incentive does someone have to become a billionaire when they're just going to get all their money taken away anyway? So this is the problem, that they would implement it thinking they were going to get this massive amount of tax revenue out of it, that it wouldn't happen. They would already have promised people a bunch of free stuff using that, wanting to use that money to give people said free stuff. The money wouldn't come to give the people the free stuff. So what do? Rather than saying, "Oh, sorry guys, we can't give you your free stuff anymore," they're going to say, um, "Okay, well we got to raise anyone above 500 million now." Then when that doesn't work, it'll be 100 million, and then eventually it'll get to the point to where it's like a million. And here's the other big problem with this stuff too, that people just economically illiterate. The economically illiteracy of these people just knows no bounds. Let's say you took Jeff Bezos and said, yeah, you got to sell $100 billion of of Amazon stock, or even billions, right? Well, what would happen? The value of Amazon would go way down, or at the very least, it would go down. What would that mean? People who work at Amazon would lose their jobs, or at the very least, anybody who Amazon was going to be hiring in the future probably wouldn't get hired, right? So you're not getting further ahead by taking money from billionaires, right? I don't think that people quote unquote need this much money. Why do you need, like, again, people don't realize, again, in Canada, we still live better than the vast majority of the world. Why do you need two TVs? Why do you need an iPhone and a tablet, right? A lot of people in the world don't even have a phone, let alone a tablet and a laptop and all this extra stuff, right? So the whole "why do you need" isn't an argument, for the simple reason that you're not going to achieve what they want to achieve. Like if we could genuinely end poverty, let's just say like no more homeless people, or even if we could cut it in half by implementing a wealth tax, okay, maybe I would consider it, but that's not how it would work. That's not how it would work. What would happen, again, like I say, and not to mention too, like what makes you think billionaires are actually going to want to stay? Like you do realize most of these people, there's a lot of countries in the world that will allow you to just buy citizenship. And in fact, I think that there's also a ton of countries that if you come and invest a certain amount of money, they'll give you citizenship. So either way, I guess you're buying citizenship, right? So what makes you think these people are going to stay? Why would they stay, right? Why would you stay? I don't get it. I don't get it. No, some of them would. Some of them probably would, but a lot of them wouldn't. And not to mention, too, what incentive do they have does someone have to do it in the future? Let's say someone has some amazing company that's going to make people's lives way better, but yet they hear, oh, yeah, I'm not going to get the minute I become a billionaire, all my money is going to be taken and the value of the company is going to go down because of it. Like, again, like it's just complete lunacy. And again, the other big problem too is that people don't seem to understand that for society to get better, you want the best people to have this money. And people say, "Oh no, you don't. They're just greedy." No, they're not. Um, and I'll tell you why. Some of them absolutely are. Like some of these billionaires, I think, are pieces of garbage. Like I don't know the you know the guy whose last name is Gates, I think would be a good example of that. But most of them aren't, right? Well, a lot of them are, to be fair. But I think people like Elon Musk, I don't think they're that bad. I mean, I don't really know a whole lot about Jeff Bezos. But this is why. I mean, just in a nutshell, why do you want billionaires to be able to or why do you want the best people to accumulate a lot of money in society? Now, as long as they do it justly, right? That's a big caveat I would throw out there too, is that if they do it through lying, cheating, and stealing, I have a problem with that. But if they do it through the free market, I don't have a problem with that. Now, why is that? If you give Elon Musk $1 billion, what would he do with that money? Well, he would do it in probably one of two ways. He would either invest that money, or he would probably start a company, or he would use it to help build up one of his existing companies, right? What does that do? That creates jobs, not only that, usually high paying jobs with a lot of growth. If you took that $1 billion and you divided it up equally amongst, you know, 1,000 people or 10,000 people, what does the average person do? Again, what does the average person do when they win the lottery, right? Or what does the average low income person do when they get a Christmas bonus or something like that? They go and they spend it on stupid stuff. They go buy a new TV, right? They go buy their smokes. They go buy their case of beer, right? They go buy a new iPhone. So again, what is doing society more help? Like, and this is the thing. Like, does the average person when they do they go into do they invest that money? No, right? No. Some of them do. Some of them definitely do, but most of them don't. So this is the thing. If you for Elon Musk to get $1 billion, society is going to improve more than the average person making 25 grand a year. Now, I think the people making 25 grand a year should be helped out, but not by taking money from other people that they haven't earned, right? As long as people make their money without coercion through the free market, I don't care how much money they have. And as long as they do it that way, it helps society as a whole. So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this wouldn't work. And it wouldn't work by definition, right? It wouldn't work by definition because billionaires would find a loophole, or they would just leave, or some of them probably would just pay it. But then in the future, no one has any incentive to become a billionaire because your money is just going to be taken. What would be the point? Right? And there's always going to be loopholes too. There's always going to be loopholes. And this is the other thing too that people just don't understand too is like I say, the majority of these people's wealth is usually tied up in stock. What would happen if massive amounts of stock was forced to be sold off um, for essentially just so the government could tax it? Well, again, people don't seem to understand too is that if the stock market goes down significantly, consumer spending goes down significantly, which means we're going to end up in a recession, right? So what these people don't seem to realize is that by let's just say I mean in Canada it's not quite the same because there isn't nearly as many billionaires and the amount of wealth the billionaires have tends to be lower. But if they did this in the States and they actually went through with it, it would cause a deep recession. I would bet every dollar I have it would cause a deep recession because if you look at consumer spending is the biggest driver of the economy and at least one of the biggest. And the stock market and consumer spending are tied very closely. Even though technically that it shouldn't affect it that much, but when the stock market is doing very good, people are more confident because they feel, oh, I'm going to be able to retire sooner and I'm going to be able to retire more comfortably. When the stock market is down, all of a sudden that flips the switch, right? Because all of a sudden people feel like, oh, I'm not going to be able to retire. I'm going to have to start scrimping and saving more, and they don't spend as much, which leads to jobs being lost, right? Which leads to even less spending, which again, it's just this cycle, right? So this is the problem again. These people, again, the entirety of what they're worried about is the intentions of this issue, but what they don't realize is it would do more harm than good, right? That's basically the reality of it, is that it would do more harm than good. So anyway, I could talk forever about this, but I really don't want to because I don't want to. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. If you like the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe. If you haven't already, make sure you check out those links below. Follow me on those other platforms if you haven't already. If you want to donate, you could do that as well. Again, I would very much appreciate whatever support I can get. But at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe and stay tuned for more.